Alright, so we've talked about our introduction and our needs assessment sections. Next up is methodology. This is where you're going to talk about your program's methods. Methodology section falls in the response review criteria. It's worth a potential of approximately 10 points. And we recommend that it be about 4 to 6 pages, but again, this is just a recommendation. It's going to vary based on how you write. And there are no associated attachments with this section. Okay, so what goes here? Well, the translation is basically goals and objectives. This isn't explicitly stated in the FOA, but we've checked with HRSA to make sure that this is where you'll want to outline your goals and objectives. And your goals and objectives are actually referred to in later sections, so this is where you want to outline those. So I know we all have a general sense of what a goal is, but just to set a basic definition, a goal is a general programmatic direction. It's often lofty in intent and consequently may not be measurable by itself. So you want to think about what does your EMSC program want to achieve and what is the end result, for example. So how is this different from an objective? An objective defines specifically what will be accomplished and by when, and it's a means of reaching a goal or future state. So it should be measurable. It usually starts with an infinitive like to assess or to conduct, and it should include quantifiable terms and timelines. Okay. Also within the methodology section, you'll want to propose methods that will be used to address the stated needs and meet program requirements and expectations, aka the EMSC Performance Measures. And this is just a basic outline of this. The detailed steps of how you plan to reach your goals and objectives will follow in the work plan section. Okay, you want to include development of effective tools and strategies with the involvement of patients, band representatives, and communities of diverse backgrounds. This might be culturally diverse or geographically or socioeconomically diverse depending on what's applicable in your state. And finally, propose methods that will be used to complete the next performance measure reassessment. Okay, so some examples of how to structure this section, and if you've written a grant before, you may have your own preference. But we came up with 3 basic suggestions for you. And the first suggestion is, with any structure that you use, you want to have an introductory paragraph to kind of orient the reviewer to how you set up your methodology section and to kind of orient them to your overall methods. So in this first suggestion, you would have one lofty, overarching goal for your entire program. Underneath that, you could have subheadings for each of the performance measures, and you would want to state out the measure again, and then any other activities that you propose. And under each of those measures or activities, you would have a goal specific to that and objective specific to that measure or activity. So this org chart kind of shows you would have your overarching goal, performance measures and other activities, and then objectives for those. So as an example, for your introductory statement, you might say, in this section we organize state's EMSC program goal and objectives by the performance measures and activities that they address. So an example of one really lofty overarching goal is stated here, and can I have a volunteer read that for us? Virginia?
Improve health care for children and families by expanding and improving the state's capacity to reduce and ameliorate pediatric emergencies by establishing all of the components of the EMSC State Partnership Performance Measure standards.
Great, thank you. And I just want to point out that this terminology was actually taken pretty much directly from the FOA, so that's kind of a trick you can use by reading through the FOA, getting those special words. To further in this example, you would have each of your measures. So for example, performance measure 72 for offline pediatric medical direction. And an objective for that might be to conduct a reassessment in the 2013-2014 grant year to evaluate the degree to which state has established established offline pediatric medical direction for pre-hospital provider agencies. Just as an example, you don't want to take my words verbatim, because they're not always the best, but just as an example. Another objective, in objective 2, you might say, to include our fan rep in the development of offline pediatric materials or something like that. Okay, as a second suggestion for structure, you would again want to introduce to your reviewer how you're setting up your section. Then you would have each of your measures listed and other activities, and then a goal specific to that measure and objective specific to that goal. So again, this org chart kind of shows you how that would be set up. An example would be to introduce your reviewer to the structure. In this section, states goals for the EMSC performance measures and other activities are outlined with objectives that contribute to each of these goals. So performance measure 71, online pediatric medical direction. Can I have someone else read this goal for me?
All pre-hospital providers have access to online pediatric medical direction to ensure that pediatric patients are transported to the right definitive care hospital.
Thank you.
Conduct a reassessment.
You can keep going if you want.
Well, you want me to stop? To conduct a reassessment of pre-hospital provider agencies in 2013 to 2014 to evaluate progress toward this standard.
Great. Thank you.
Subjective.
So you could keep going with your other objectives and then continue on with the other measures. All right, third suggestion for structure of the methodology section. Again, you'll want to introduce your structure to your reviewers. This time, instead of just having one overarching goal or one goal for each measure, you could group your measures by ways that they're related to each other. For example, data collection versus non-data collection measures, and then have a goal for that group and objectives for that goal. Or you could also group them by the EMS, the hospital-related, and the permanence measures. And then again, have a goal for each of those groups and objectives for that goal. And this, again, the org chart kind of shows you that structure. All right, I know we have some people in here that are experienced in writing grant proposals before. So I want to put the question to them, what other suggestions do you have for organizing this section? Yes, Rhonda?
I would just say that suggestion number 1 is the easiest for people to understand, and it probably is the easiest way for somebody who's not familiar with the program to be able to methodically go through each thing, and you make it simple.
Okay, great. Good suggestion. Tony or Janet?
I like the second suggestion example.
Okay.
And I think it's very similar to what we did with the last competition.
Yeah. Number 3, mixing them and stuff, I think.
Yeah, no, that's
Great feedback for especially for the new teams. Anything to add? Alright, well I do think as long as you're addressing all of the performance measures and any other activities that you propose, any structure is good. You just want to make sure it makes sense, that it's easy for you and makes sense for you, because the structure of the methodology section is going to be reflected in the work plan and probably the evaluation and maybe even resolution of challenges. Possibly. So you want to make sure that it flows well and that it makes sense. All right, and we've already kind of discussed this a bit, but I just want to remind you that pediatric readiness is going to be related to your performance measures 74 and 75, so it's not another activity. And its relation is, I think, that the results of this assessment will help you understand your emergency department's readiness to treat children, and can also help you maybe lead to their recognition to treat children if you don't already have a recognition system in place. And then also, as we mentioned, the plan right now is to include performance measures 76 and 77 on agreements and guidelines in the pediatric readiness assessment. So you could use that to collect data for those measures. All right, final things to keep in mind for this section. The FOA again calls for active engagement of a fan rep, so if you can include that wherever possible, that's a good idea. I just mentioned the pediatric readiness is related to those performance measures. This is only your methods, your goals and objectives. The detailed steps of how you plan to meet those goals and objectives will follow in the work plan section. And I'm going to give you some time to outline your methodology section. If you're new to the program, you might want to experiment with some of the different structures and see what works for you. Maybe talk to some of the more experienced program managers